Canonical is the publisher of Ubuntu. I should say it's actually mostly known as the publisher of Ubuntu, but we're in effect publishing a lot of different open source software. As a matter of fact, our mission is really to make open source software available and easy to use for everyone, whether it's for end users, making sure that they can use Linux as an operating system, all the way to telcos. We're here at Mobile World Congress so that they can use open source to run their networks and their entire operations, from all the way from the infrastructure, all the way to the edge of the network, the antennas, and so on and so forth. It's always hard to summarize 20 years without being too boring, but I can give you a few of the kind of headline moments across the last 20 years. First headline moment, I think the one that a lot of people know about, is the launch of Ubuntu Desktop. That was in 2004, and the one that I think got a lot of people to familiarize themselves with Ubuntu. In those days, it was like the replacement of Windows for your PC. However, there are a lot of very significant moments that happen along the way that have maybe less well known, but have shaken the industry quite a bit. So 2008, for example, is where Ubuntu Server was launched, and it got adopted by AWS. And for that reason, today, most of the public cloud workload is actually running on Ubuntu. So while a lot of people still see Ubuntu as the desktop, majority of the workload, majority of the Ubuntu today in the world is actually running in the public cloud, whether it's AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, IBM Cloud, and so on and so forth. And another interesting milestone is 2012. That's when, in the Ubuntu archive, we started shipping OpenStack. OpenStack was seen as, how do you build a private cloud in using open source? Today, once again, that moment in 2012 is maybe for a lot of people forgotten, but now if you look at companies like BT, for example, British Telecom in the UK, their entire network is running on OpenStack. So most of the calls that will happen in the UK would actually go through that cloud, that network cloud. And so in a day when you see a lot of tension in the market around VMware and Broadcom, that's a particularly useful alternative for a lot of people. And a lot of people will also remember the launch of the Ubuntu phone and particularly the crowdfunding campaign, which at the time was one of the biggest ones. That unfortunately didn't come into much in terms of a phone that you would have in your hands. But in a surprising way, that was the start of the adventuring of Canonical and of Ubuntu in the IoT space. So today, whether it's robotics, whether it's drones, whether it's supermarket tills, digital signage, a lot of that will be running on Ubuntu, and that's because some of the work that was done for the phone migrated into the IoT space. And more recently, I think what a lot of people have, if you walk around the show here, you see AI everywhere, and a lot of that was actually based on Ubuntu. A lot of the developer environment for AI, if you look at what NVIDIA ships with by default, is going to be with Ubuntu or variants thereof. And so that is the latest new wave of innovation that we've been bringing, and that is. Last year we had our 20-year celebration. This year we're trying to actually talk a lot more around that move from that was just Canonical equals Ubuntu to a lot of the variety in open source software that we're providing as a company. And this is once again why we're here at Mobile World Congress, talking about some of our AI stack, some of our edge stack for telco. Making money with open source is a bit of a mystery for a lot of people. The typical business model of open source is it's free to adopt. But if you want to have someone providing you software patches over the years, security patches over the years, especially if you want to continue to use the software after its lifetime, so typically Ubuntu ships with 5 years free of support, five years free patching for a big part of the software stack. If you want to use the software beyond that, then you're up to you on your own. And that's where we start offering extended security maintenance. But also, if you want someone to call if you have a problem, think of it. If your entire company relies on Ubuntu and on open source to run, you want to have someone to call if anything goes wrong. And open source software is really great quality software, but it's a bit like a health insurance. There can always be something that happens. So what do you want to do? Live a risky life or buy an insurance policy? And I think a lot of the work we're doing is actually that insurance policy. But it's also not everyone is familiar with the way open source software works, how to use it in your environment, and having a helping hand to help you do so is also one thing we do. So we offer a lot of services as well on top of that. The key reason historically why Ubuntu has been used quite a lot within the enterprise space, particularly from developers in the first place, because that's where we see a lot of adoption, and then in production, is it's just the right mix of long-term support. So you choose libraries and they're going to be supported over the long term, and just enough innovation so that regularly you get the latest version of library XYZ. And so that right balance has been the historical choice as to why developers have picked Ubuntu. That with obviously the fact that they know that for the last 20 years, more or less, every 2 years, there's a new release coming. So if you want to have the latest version of the kernel, the latest version of Python, etc., it is going to be available within 2 years. That's particularly useful. And that is being the key driver for adoption. But the beauty of this is also that whatever you develop on can go to production automatically. It's not like one of these things where you develop here and then you need to do all sorts of work to actually make it production ready, package it for production. What's running on your desktop, it's what's going to run on the server, it's going to run on your container. It's all the same version, and that simplifies your development lifecycle quite a bit. This is like a big thing to unpack here. Let me tell you what we're doing today, and then I'll give you first, and then I'll give you a bit of a perspective view for the future. From what we're doing today, there's two interesting sides to AI. One is, how can we more effectively train and run models? And that requires, obviously, these models to run on an operating system on some hardware. And so from this standpoint, we're spending a lot of efforts working with chipset manufacturers, the like of NVIDIA, Intel, Qualcomm, to make sure that these models can run or can be trained very effectively on these devices. There's one of the potential big impact on the planet is the amount of electricity consumption there is by all these AI model, and like whether it's training or inference, and the fact that we allowed AI models to be run quite effectively at the edge on your computer, on your device, and that's us making our little piece towards that. The other piece of work that we're doing is more on the productization of AI. I think a lot of people talk about AI as you got this model and you're going to run it. It's a very complex thing, from gathering the data to training your model based on the data, to creating this model and then spreading it onto all the edge devices, to then bringing back the data as to how are these models performing, are they drifting, bringing back this data and then using this to retrain the model afterwards. And this is where today open source is by far the preferred model across every single developer and every company adopting AI or trying to train their own AI as opposed to just consuming AI. And so from that perspective, we're doing a lot of work to make it in the same way that we make open source in general easier to use and easier to go to production with. If use in the case of an enterprise is really going to production. We offer solutions around like Kubeflow, for example, that allow you to do AI in production. To answer your wider question as to what is the impact, whether it's on technology first, what we're finding is right now a lot of like productivity of developers is increasing drastically, and that's going to be I think the first element we're all going to see. I think the developer is the easiest one in some ways to measure. You can see how many lines of code, even though lines of code is a terrible measure of quality of developer or productivity, but it's an easier way than, let's say, a marketer and how many videos you create or something. And so that is something we're starting to see, productivity in individuals, in companies, in society increasing. And there's loads of question marks as well as to how far do you want it to go and what is the impact going to be on jobs and so on and so forth. But I feel that this is the kind of thing where, well, unfortunately, going to have to see what's going to happen before we can make a judgment. Personally, like everyone, I like to do a lot of fun tests. My latest one is I'm actually training an AI to become my personal coach for sports. So every week I'm doing what ChatGPT tells me to do from an exercise standpoint. I think around AI, there's a little bit of the two potential paths. There's an AI world where you have 3-4 companies in the world that do everything. And there's an AI path where you have a lot more of a distributed system, whether it's, like small language models, whether it's model that just developed just for you. I believe that second model is the most likely to happen. It doesn't look like the world of AI is going towards a winner takes all. So if you believe that the world of multiple players in this space is where we're heading, then it is our role to enable for everyone to adapt the best tools, bring into production for themselves at low cost, so that the differentiation in number of developers you have, the amount of money that you can put into buying software is reduced, and everyone can actually adopt these latest and greatest AI tools as much as possible. So I think that's really where we're heading from a company standpoint, and where I think our customers also want to go and have take their own AI futures into their own hands.